Welcome to Game Soup, it's a game design podcast where Fridays in a pot and see what's cooking. I'm Chloe Montgomery, and I'm joined by your computer's crushingest computer,
Kayla Dice.
Take two.
Is this part of the podcast where you tell me get a new computer and I say I can't do that, I don't have money?
We get a new computer when we get £100 a month on Patreon. Woo!
No, we don't. That would not be enough. Split between two, that would still not... 50 quid is not enough for me to get a new computer.
Well, after 6 months, maybe. Oh dear. So we say it's take two because we did 5 minutes of podcast and then Kayla's recording cut out and then we deleted it by accident. So here we go again. Yeah, Mouse in the House is out. I can't even remember what we talked about. Itch is okay. Yeah, I guess we skipped the preamble this week because we kind of already did it. We're warmed up, baby.
Well, yeah, we were just saying Mouse in the House is out. You can get it now on Itch, and you'll have copies of it physically at the next con you're at, and then I asked, do you want to talk about that? And then we were dead.
Okay, well, my next con is hopefully going to be Dragon Mate. I say hopefully, I've got the time off work, and we're already looking at a book in the stall with... the Indie League. I certainly hope so would have been booked.
Wait, yeah, I'd assume by looking into booking it, you mean just figuring out the stall they presumably booked months ago, right?
Yeah, I certainly hope so.
Because I'm like, they are gone otherwise. I will be at Dragon Meet.
Yeah, I guess we're on a floor outside.
You're probably there. You've probably just not read messages in much depth.
People don't message that group chat enough. But yeah, and then after that we are going solo, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I've had a good week. I'm kind of out of it. I feel like something clicked in my head yesterday and I forgot something and now my head feels like it's missing something. So, that's nice.
Interesting.
Kayla's going to psychoanalyze that off the pod, I hope.
I'm not too into life path mode where I'm just like, oh yeah, well this is the part of the podcast where I psychoanalyze the other person on the recording.
But you'll be at Dragon Mate. You should have copies of Psycho Dungeon and let's see if I pay attention to what Kayla actually releases. She'll have copies of Psycho Dungeon. And Shadow, other side of the coin. No, it's called Nemesis: Revengeance.
Nope.
Retribution.
There was a moment at Tabletop Scotland where I heard you try and describe one of my games, and you've mentioned it before, but it did come across in this moment where I was also helpless because I can't interrupt you talking to a customer, where I'm just like, oh man, you have no idea what I've released. What I will have at Tabletop Scotland, I'll have Terminal, which might be the last con I have Terminal at for a bit, depending on how much it sells and other things. I'll have Psycho Dungeon. I'll hopefully have a first release of Nemesis Retribution. But otherwise, I'll also hopefully be opening pre-orders for Transgender Deathmatch Legend 2 around that time, and I'll have lots of old products available, as well as I'll be at a stall sharing space with Laurie and Kristen from 12 Pins Press and Eco Mothos.
Oh, I've not heard of those guys. What do they make?
And then that's the game.
I was Eco Mothos, is that...
That's the name of the game.
It does sound like a...
That's the name of the game. Did you not see it about last year? It launched, I think, a bit before Terminal, I remember. But yeah. Oh, also the week after that, I, completely solo, with no one else, am going back to Scotland for
I was
Tax
looking
Fest.
at that. You'll have to let us know how it goes. And Kayla will have to do attack podcasting without me.
I don't think I will. I don't think that will happen. The reason you can do attack podcasting is because you're on stalls with other people where you have an excuse to just leave the stall for ages.
After the con. No, that will not happen either because it's really awkward and everyone's drunk.
Nope. Not going to be bothered by then.
No.
You going to attack podcasts at the end of the month for that con you were thinking of dropping into?
Oh yeah, there's one in Gateshead I might pop along to, not as an exhibitor, as a customer. Yeah, I'll see what I can do.
Punter.
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of conventions, do we want to mash up the last 3 spoils of attack podcasting we had and see what game we get out?
Yeah, I remember having a very confusing conversation with at least one of these remaining few, so let's see what we've got. So we'll start from the top and go down.
Well, live at Tabletop Scotland, please introduce yourself.
I'm Josh of Hive Mind Games. Tapestry.
Tapestry is your word, thank you very much.
What I do find funny about this is the more you've done this, the more you've completely left off the part where you tell them you want a word. And so it does just sound like someone introducing themselves and then saying a non-sequitur.
No, I mean, like, for some of these people, I did have to be like, oh, so this is what Game Soup is, and this is what I do at conventions. I go around and I ask for people to give me a single word. But it's like... It makes sense with the 2 minutes preamble conversation. And I feel like we give it enough context on the pod.
No, I believe you. It does. That also makes sense. I just think it's funny how the results
Listen,
sound.
give it a year and it'll just be random
I
people
get the feeling
saying,
the
single words into microphones. We won't even know who's saying it. Like...
I like that all of these videos are usually 10 seconds, and I can see the next one is 37 seconds, so I assume that's the one where it's gone a bit rambly. I'm going to click play. I'm excited to hear it.
Well, live at Tabletop Scotland, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Brockman. I'm here at the Indie Connection store, where we have games from various indie designers from around the UK. I have here my game based on Slavic folklore about witches and my game about conspiracy theories. But we have all sorts of games from sci-fi through spy adventures, through folk horror. So yeah, it's great being here. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you very much. And what is your word?
Evening.
Evening. Thank you very much.
Okay, no, that was just a long introduction. I thought I thought that was one where you got really confused, and that was why it was longer. Indie Connection were opposite us. They're really lovely.
Yeah, no, they had some cool games, some tall women. What else do you need in a stall at a convention?
You're gonna take your podcast first to the con. Sorry, I mean your con first to the podcast.
I don't understand what you're saying. Oh, my con first.
No,
oh, yeah, no, understandable. No, I got it there. Listen, there's some good tall women at these conventions, guys. You should come and see me. I'm a tall woman, I promise. Here's the next clip.
Well, live at Tabletop Scotland, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm CJ from Rowan Rook and Deckard.
And what is your prompt for today?
My prompt for today. You know, you did warn me that this was coming. Yeah, and then we turned on the recording. My prompt for a game, huh? How about you are...
One word.
Oh, one word. You... Oh, I can't say you then, can I? Soup.
Soup, thank you.
It finally happened! We finally got soup. So we have Tapestry, soup, and what was the other one?
Evening.
Tapestry of an evening soup.
So it's a game where you have to sew a recipe into a tapestry in one evening. There's a timer. That's the game. Next one. No.
You don't have the scope of how big a tapestry is, do you?
I've seen tapestries. I know the Bayou one's like the biggest thing ever.
I do think there's something interesting here. In talking about the fact of like soup is, you know, it's a recipe which you are making up of just essentially like combining lots of stuff in one thing, and tapestry similarly is often like, you know, admittedly a tapestry does not have to be like a complicated like storytelling thing. Like just checking the meaning of it in a picture sense, it can just be
Man with sword
a
hits snail.
singular pattern.
Yeah.
I mean, it can even just be patterns. It's not always necessarily needing to be representative. But the way it is often used is things with, like, complex sequences of events and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, like, oh, there's actually an interesting parallel there. And part of me is wondering if this is... So I feel this is semi, like, sort of a storytelling game.
Yeah.
My idea maybe is, like, you see a tapestry already of a battle, and you are you are interpreting the tapestry, which is just this art piece, and building, like, a recipe corresponding to different events in it, and you're like, this is the soup that was made after this battle, or this disaster, or something. And you're kind of shading in all of these characters as you do that and discussing. I do think it's just like we get a painting. You could probably, like, take a bit out of Laurie's, like, Hieronymus book and use public domain paintings, and you're, like, just sort of imagining that. Or if you ever see, like, TikToks where people just voice the characters, it's similar kind of improvisational impulses. If you get an image, you're interpreting that person, and you're deciding what they brought to the soup.
Yeah.
And I think evening is because you play this game in the evening and make the soup.
Yeah, it's a game where you play it while making a soup. Like, as a group, you have to make, like, you have to bring things to this soup cooking evening, and you play it in your kitchen. You can't play it, you have to play it around the hob, around your big pot. Special edition of this game on Kickstarter.
I'm gonna say,
big pot.
I'm gonna veto this part of it because you have invented a game that I can now play.
You can bring
Where
chairs
I'm like, oh, this
into the
game seems
kitchen.
really fun. You've seen my kitchen. You cannot.
It's intimate, baby.
Yeah, there's intimate and there's a fucking orgy, babes. Okay, but actually I was going to say, like, I think while you interpret the characters, you make the shopping list.
Okay,
and then it's a case that you have, like, a briefer scene where you go and do a shopping trip, and then you are cooking the soup, and maybe there's, like, more structures there as you cook the meal together.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's maybe, like, a sort of two-part phase almost, like, recipe building, soup building. And I think, like, you kind of have, like, you know how a lot of people have, like, sort of stars or wishing or, like, more sort of formalized, like, debriefing sessions? I think you really formalize that in this game and combine it with, like, the eating thing. Like, I think this is, like, not a party game in the way it's weird we've used it before. This is, like, a parlor game. It's not a LARP because you're interpreting things and you're not really playing characters, but it's got LARP energy in the sense of being, like, saying, well, like, what you're doing is actually very material and linked to the world.
Yeah. I think
if I was someone who knew way more... Oh, sorry, you go.
I was going to say it could be useful as, like, a debriefing sort of safety tool, but that assumes you have an extra hour at the end of every game to, like, go to the supermarket.
Yeah, I think at least if we're combining the tapestry element, it probably doesn't work as a thing you are comboing onto another game. But also, I think you could, like, release a supplement here, which is, like, a mix of, like, session zero stuff with preparing a recipe and a mix of, like, debrief stuff with wrapping up a session. Like, I think you could do that, and that could be a fun sort of, like, little bonus. Not even a game there, that's a pamphlet, but I think, like, this thing itself, the Tapestry idea, I think works as a game. I was just going to say, I think if I was more of an art history person, this game could be more interesting than the version of it if I wrote it. I think if Laurie wrote it, it would probably have a lot to say.
Yeah, we get Laurie on board.
Whereas I think if I wrote it, it would be just a lot of, like, open-ended questions you can apply to people.
Yeah.
But I think, like, also, I'll throw it out there, I think I'm a bad person to make a cooking game.
I think we just, like...
I don't know if we
have, like, here's a basic stock for a soup. Prepare your vegetables or whatever you've gotten. Put it all in. Soup, baby.
No, but I think there's something about, like, making a soup together, I think. Like, I know I pointed out the fact that, like, you cannot fit, like, 2 people in my kitchen. It's narrow enough that it's, like, that's not nice, being in there with 2. But I think there are rules for if you are cooking together. Just almost, like, even if it's like a sort of suggested like conversation topics. I think this game is a bit like ritual-esque in some ways.
Yeah, I think this is very like formalized. Like lots of, and then we do this, and then we take a minute and we light a candle or something.
It is the kind of I'll throw it out that I do think it's the kind of thing you could sell very easily to people who don't know RPGs at all.
Yeah.
Because in a way, even though it would be like, I think you could also kind of sell it to like certain kinds of new agey people if you did a certain twist on it and leaned into ritual elements. I was thinking like, is there, so regular listeners of the podcast might know, I don't know if we've ever talked about it before, that I am a very fussy eater for reasons I'm not going to go into. And so I don't actually really eat much soup, or soup at all. Which I think there is like episode 4 or 5 or so I bring up I don't like soup and you were scandalized. I was like, could you make this game something where I would eat it, which would, I guess, be more baking? But I'm like, I don't know, baking is more structured. Like, the reason soup works so well for this is that you are kind of making soup by just throwing stuff in a pot.
Yeah.
Do you have a fun name for this game?
Tapestry of Tastes.
There we go. Done. I have an alternate pitch for this exact same series of prompts.
Ooh. Yeah, that one was more me than a mix.
Yeah.
So, do your version.
So, I think, in my version of this game, Tapestry Evening Soup, I think you either get a story in the book or you create a story from a series of prompts, and then you create some characters who reinterpret that story, and then I think you do that a few more times, or like go down a generation, like you're telling the story to this next generation, and like you see how it recreates itself.
Have you ever seen I feel like it might be a fable, but it also might actually be something written by someone, but like the Stone Soup story?
I think that's what put it into my head. And it's like, oh yeah, we're also eating great-grandmother's classic recipe, except this slightly changed, like, oh, we didn't have the right spices like 100 years ago, so we changed it. And then 50 years later, they changed the vegetable for something that was popular at the time. And it's like, it's not what great-grandmother would have eaten, but this is our version of it, you know? I think you, like, write that as a story in the book. I don't know.
Yeah. I feel I could see this being a very you game. Like, kind of, in a way, like a lot of the Vante stuff was like, it's essays. This is also, here's this game. It also comes with a cookbook and fictional stories.
Yeah, I think that pitch for a one-page RPG collection, but we also write a recipe for every game in the book.
I think that could be fun. I don't think I'd be a right person to work on it unless it was like a baking book. But yeah, I think that's actually a very fun concept.
Yeah.
That's something you should work on next year. And also, that's fun. I mean, I feel like what you are actually pitching should be like the Game Soup cookbook, where it's as many of the Game Soup games that you can make into one pages and then a recipe with them.
We do soups with them, yeah.
It would be limiting to only do soups.
And broths.
But,
a nice little bread.
Yeah. I guess you call it Sankhouse, but like, it would be the as seen on Game Soup.
I'm sure I've kicked it around on the pod before, but I wanted to do like a one-page game collection, like the Biscuit Tin or something.
Yeah, I think comboing it with a cookbook thing could be fun. I don't know necessarily how much you are a cooking person, though.
I like to bake. I'm not very great at cooking. Last night for dinner I made meatball subs. So, which is just meatballs, pasta sauce, and little bread. So, you know...
I really love baking. I eat mainly the same meals every day. And I have a mildly more expanded diet than what I eat every day. Not much, but mildly more. But also, I think there's part of me that's just like, well, that's easy. I don't actually need to think about cooking or anything at all. And it's not had any health consequences. Like, David Lynch does this, but I think there it's more of a sort of, all the focus is off and I'm only on the the things. But I was talking to my boyfriend who basically wears the same outfit every day, and I was like, I think I'm about food how you are about clothes. And he had to concede the point. That's fun. What would you call your idea for Tapestry evening soup?
I would call it the generational soup. Like, generations, a story of soup. I don't know.
Generational soup. Like in the way people say generational talent. We're like at a closing point, but I had an interesting thing I wanted to talk about. Not necessarily as a we make a game out of it, more just like, an interesting design question I'd been batting about in my head, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Last week when we talked about me saying, like, I enjoyed just announcing things on the podcast that I'm not going to talk about anywhere else publicly. I'm going to do that now. So, as I mentioned, I'll have Terminal at UK Games, not UK Games Expo, at Dragon Meet, but there's actually only, like, under 60 copies of Terminal left. And I've been talking to some distributors and more shops about them, and the likelihood is Terminal will run out by next year. It'll be out of print. It might happen by UK Games Expo, which I'm hoping to go to. So it might be I don't have Terminal, I only have, like, Psycho Dungeon and Transgender Deathmatch Legend 2 as big titles there. I might have a bit left by then, and then they go at the con.
Yeah.
And the thing is, Terminal's a bit expensive to reprint. If I just did it as it is, so I'm actually gonna remaster and re-edition the game a lot. So I've been making some mechanical changes that I think really focused the game more on what was interesting about it. Stuff that makes it easier to play Terminal as a pick up and play game, because I think I realized that, like, as my game habits made, Terminal is like a game that is, I think it's really genuinely good, but it's not a game I'm in a position to play much, and I'm like, well, I'd like to play the biggest game I made. Right, so some of these modifications are made at that, and it's probably going to come out as like 2 A5 books, I mean. So it'll be like Terminal Reloaded, System Manual, and Terminal Reloaded, Pirate Signals.
That's fun.
Yeah, don't tweet about this. Don't, like, do that stuff, but, like, you know, and when I announce this sometime fucking end of next year or late, after summer next year, you can be like, oh my god, so excited you finally announced this. I was so hyped when I first heard about it on the Game Soup. You can sell that, but don't...
You're in the inner circle.
Yeah, like, respect respect what that comes with, That's all I'm saying. Be cool. Be cool is what I always want the audience to be. But I was writing some extra stuff about challenges. So the way challenges worked in original Terminal was it was like dice pool building, and a lot of stuff was built on your reputation.
Yeah.
Some of the reworks I've done have been kind of making challenges a bit more PBTA in how they resolve. Like, it's not just like, oh, here's the resolutions. It's bringing in a lot more of that, like, oh, if you've rolled really well, you pick how things are resolving. If on other things, the system gets more of that pick. On other things, like the reverse stuff. But I wrote a little section on about, like, the scale of a challenge. This is all going to come back to a design point and what I wanted to bring at some point. Where I think the way things work in Terminal is, like, a challenge is like a scene ending move always. Like, it's rare that a scene is going to have multiple challenges rolled, because it's like, yeah, challenge isn't hacking a computer, it's hacking an entire database. A challenge isn't punching someone in the face, it's winning an entire fight. It's like the whole argument, not just is a lie convincing.
Yeah.
Like, the scale of a resolution there is actually big, and it involves the fact that you are cutting around scenes more. And that wasn't made very explicit in Terminal, but as a change for here. And I was thinking, by contrast, Transgender Deathmatch Legend 2, a resolution there, the scale of it is like a single blow. Like, a resolution of, like, I play this card, you play that card, who wins the trick, is like an elbow strike to the face. Not even like, I'm trying to beat this guy up, it's I'm trying to do one move. And those are, like, very far apart. But I guess I was wondering here, like, thinking about the scale of a resolution, do you have preferences there? Like, do you have preferences in games you play, in games you design, or stuff like that?
I think I do very, minor, like, resolutions. It's like, oh, can I climb this cabinet? roll the dice. If I fail, okay, I guess I have to find another way up. With Terminal, I think because you're doing this entire building up to this one climactic roll, it gives itself its massive weight to it, and it sucks when you fail, but it's like you feel like you've earned it when it succeeds. But it's like if it fails, you know you could have put more effort in to build up to get more pluses. It's like, have you played Disco Elysium?
I played the first day of Disco Elysium, and I then am sort of like, I get scared about finishing it.
Understandable. There is...
maybe it's just like things with time.
Minor spoilers for Disco Elysium, but there's a check near the end of the game where everything you've done builds up to it, and it's like, you have to get an 11, which is pretty hard because it's a 2d6 system, but everything you've done builds up to this one check where it's like, if you've done a side quest, you get an extra bonus. Like, it feels like you've earned this extra thing, and it's like a climax of kind of your relationships with a character in the game. And it's like, it's a really cool moment. And it feels like the same in Terminal.
Yeah, it's also the thing of Terminal's like an action movie, ultimately. But it's not very zoomed in on combat. It's more about, like, big, epic, explosive scenes. And the pace of it is very, like, choppy and cutty. It's not like, okay, you're here, you want to go to here, let's play a scene of you walking. It's like, no, we're going to cut straight to you being in the new place because
the walking's not the important thing. Yeah.
Soviet montage rather than like, oh yes, we follow in real time. So for that things, it makes sense.
And it's like, and not a lot of systems are built around this final climactic punch. It could certainly be put into a lot of games. It's like 4th edition D&D. Sorry to bring it back to D&D, but 4th edition D&D had this thing at the end of a dungeon where it's like the dungeon's collapsing around you. You had to do a series of checks to escape or whatever. But it's like, what if that was instead, oh yeah, we cleared out this path of monsters so we get a plus to our escape check. Like, we disarmed the traps so we get another plus, or like, we didn't disarm the traps so we get a negative, you know? It's like...
Yeah. For this, what I'm tentatively calling Terminal Reloaded, I might rename it, but also I'm like, Reloaded is the best word.
It's very
is the thing. It is the name of the first Matrix sequel, which I rarely do a direct riff and stuff, but also I'm like, it's the best word. It's computers, it's guns, and it's signals. It's also good for, like, games specifically because we kind of, have a sense of remastered, re-editioned, or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas anything else, like Recharged or whatever, it's not as good. So, I don't know. But yeah, for this, I think I've really zoomed in a focus on what an individual session is and what an individual operation is. And that gives you tools for, like, this sets me up that I could just run one-shot games of Terminal, because I'm like, I'll just pick an operation, and I have that. But it also means now I think I've really zoomed in how the challenge, the final showdown at the end, is the meeting of everything you've done, where it's like, instead of showdown tokens, I've changed the name and framing of that, mainly because I'm like, they're not tokens.
You can't spend them.
It's just a numerical bonus. So I've just said, oh, it's your progress. You're building your progress. And at the end of the game, it's like, your progress is like going to be a +5. Oh, but this thing's a +10. You also then have the other thing, which is the cost. And I think that meets a bit cleaner now. Your abilities have been, like, really streamlined, and that everything is about, like, well, what can you do in an individual operation? What's the arc of an operation? How, like, framing scenes. I think I've actually used a lot of tech I ended up, like, perfecting in, like, Nemesis Retribution, and then getting to port that back to Terminal and think really about how the pace of a session works. I think it is a lot more focused on, like, Terminal is a game about, like, becoming who you are, about being really fucking cool, but also then about, like, that meeting of, like, this is a final showdown based on everything you've accomplished so far and everything you're willing to sacrifice, and is that enough? And I think all these changes make it better. I've, like, mainly finished the rules rewrites, and now it's a lot about converting Because a lot of then the material in Terminal originally was more kind of like setting guide stuff for big story arcs, whereas here now everything's like focused in on an individual operation instead. So it's rewriting a lot of that material to just be tighter and more focused to how I would be using it. So that's exciting. But also, yeah, I was thinking it's interesting, because there the scale of a resolution mechanic is huge. Transgender Deathmatch Legend, it's small. I feel like in Belonging Outside Belonging, it's... Like, what do you think is the sort of scale? Because I think it can vary a lot.
Yeah, I was going to bring up
Belonging Outside Belonging.
Belonging Outside Belonging, because it's like, on an individual check level, an individual, like, spending a token, whatever a token, it's small, but then it's like, I want to do something really crazy. I'm going to spend 5 tokens and do a bunch of moves back to back.
You can, yeah, take over a scene very quickly. Yeah. I think it varies, because sometimes, like, I'm thinking of Psycho Dungeon, because I was doing the layout for that recently. And it's like, oh yeah, some of your moves just say a single thing. Like, a vulnerable move be saying, like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like, that's an individual, very small. But then also for Psycho Dungeon, it's spend a token, destroy a monster.
Yeah.
Like, that's much... I think BOB is very good at, like, holding in a lot of different scales of actions within the same mechanics.
Yeah.
Whereas I guess most things that are, like, dice roll based, it's actually more narrow. Like, it's not necessarily narrow, but it's like, if you're... Like, there are some other kinds of actions in Terminal, but they're always kind of at that big scale as well, because it would be harder for me to then do a resolution mechanic which is zooming in, but still using the same kind of dice system. Whereas in the same sense, yeah, it's if you're rolling for lockpicking and you're rolling for, like, fight and people have hit points, it's suddenly a lot harder to do a big roll which is supposed to be scene deciding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I prefer a mix depending on what the individual needs of a story or game are. And I don't necessarily know where I land in general, and it's not always a thing I've thought much about before, other than thinking about it for Terminal now. And I think it's something I'm going to probably look at or question a lot in some things I make going.
Yeah. Normally we end on a joke, but that feels like pretty conclusive stuff. Thank you for listening to Game Soup.
I thought you were gonna thank you for listening to Game Soup, and then it was silent, and I was like, fuck, do I need to say more? We're at 35, I want to get out of here.